am I sinful for my thoughts? Which, by the way, Christian theologians have been discussing for a long time about the idea of sinful thoughts. And we also have our own notion of what sinful thoughts would be. And last week, when I spoke about what Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah said, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah has an interesting commentary on this. In his chapter on the ghiba of the heart, the backbiting of the heart, which is what? Su'adhan, negative assumptions, suspicion. If you suspect something enough, if you keep spying, if you keep following someone's flaws and faults, waiting for them to fall, looking into their private affairs, eventually you're going to develop an obsession of sorts. And once you start looking through, eventually it's like something you have to say to someone. You have to backbite that person. So the ghiba of the heart is at the level of su'adhan, that negative suspicion. And look what Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah said. He said that su'adhan, which is the backbiting of the heart, is just as sinful as speaking it. Interesting. He said, because just like it is muharram, just like an yahrum an tuhadditha bihi ghayrak, just like it is sinful for you to speak to someone else about it, it is sinful for you an tuhadditha bihi nafsak, for you to have that conversation with yourself constantly. But then he said, this is not talking about al-khawatir. This is not talking about the passing thoughts. This is not talking about the things that just pass through. You see something and you go, and you just kind of move away from it. You don't want to look, you don't want to entertain it any further. He said, but this is talking about a thought with istiqrar and istimrar. That you settle inside yourself and you continue with yourself. So you engage the negative thinking constantly. And you allow it to settle your mind, you allow it to settle your heart, and you keep on talking about it even to yourself. And you have to cut it off. Now, think about this for a moment, because it's a powerful concept, and I'm going to talk about where the ulama drew the line, how the scholars drew the line, and what that means for us, because Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah gives us a clue when he talks about istiqrar and istimrar. Do you let it settle, and do you continue with it, or do you stop it? Think about this powerful notion for a moment, inshaAllah ta'ala, and go to another hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever intends to do a good deed, or that's how it's translated, but the actual words are, man hamma bihasana. Whoever intends to do a good deed and does not do it, then Allah writes down for him the good deed anyway. Right? We know this hadith very well. And man hamma biha, whoever has the intention to do it and then does it, kutibat lahu ashra ila sab'i mi'a, that Allah has written for that person 10, at least 10, up to 700, up to adha'af, up to however much Allah wants to multiply it. So the minimum you get for doing a good deed, for actually following through and doing a good deed, is 10 times that good deed. And that's from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the minimum. If it was done with even more ihsan, then listen to the ihsan of Allah, 700 times, up to wherever you could imagine or could not comprehend. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, and whoever, man hamma bi sayyi'ah, whoever intends to commit a sin and does not follow through and commit that sin, then it's not written, right? But then the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever intends to do a sin and then commits that sin, how many sins are written down? Just one. Allah will never increase the sin. So it's out of His mercy that Allah increases the reward of the good deed. It's out of His justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never increases the degree of the sin, the gravity of the sin. A sin is a sin and it's one sin. A good deed is at least 10, up to 700, up to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides. So the ulama talked about this idea here. So what about that person then who decides to commit a sin, meaning you wanted to say something, you wanted to do something, but you did not follow through? One of the narrations indicates, tarakaha min ajli. They left off that sin for my sake. So it's not that you were on your way to do a sin or you were about to do it and something else stopped you, but that you developed the resolve along the way to stop committing the sin. And what did the Prophet ﷺ say happens as a result of that? If a person leaves it off for the sake of Allah, Allah writes down ajr for that person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually writes down one good deed for you. Because you stopped yourself from doing it, And that was an entire process. And out of the mercy of Allah, Allah writes down a hasana for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will write down a good deed for you.